Hey guys, this is a extra tutorial to go along with the Cryptomatte tutorial. And so the reason I'm making this is going to just be a really brief short tutorial, but a lot of people are asking, well, how do I use Cryptomatte if I'm only using Photoshop, right? And so the good news is you can kind of hackish use Cryptomatte with Photoshop. The bad news is you're not really getting the full benefit and power out of Cryptomatte doing it this way. Unfortunately, Adobe products are terrible with linear EXR files. This includes After Effects. And so you kind of need plugins to work well with EXRs. And so pretty much right now, Cryptomatte, the way it's designed, if you watch my previous tutorial, it's designed to read in extra data with a plugin and make it easy to pull masks out of depth of field or motion blurred objects. And so that's one of actually the problems. A lot of people wanted a clown pass. And so if you don't know what a clown pass is, it's an AOV where everything is different colors, for example. And the problem with that is that it doesn't work well with depth of field or motion blur because of color contamination, since colors are overlapping each other due to the depth of field or motion blur. And so Cryptomatte kind of solves this. Again, it's not perfect, but it's better than the other methods we have. And so the whole idea was that Cryptomatte would help the matting process in these difficult situations make them easier to do. Now the problem is that right now there's a beta After Effects plugin. Doesn't work too great, but it works, and there's nothing for Photoshop. So a lot of people right now are asking, okay, how do I work with this with Photoshop? You know, this doesn't help me because I can't use it in Photoshop. And so here I am to make you a video to explain how you can use it in Photoshop, but it's limited. So instead of getting the special data like you would out of a regular Cryptomatte plugin and the Cryptomatte system, you're just getting basically a clown pass, just like a generic clown pass. And so we're going to use our same car scene. So let's just fire up a render, or finish this one actually. And what, like I said, one of the problems with making clown passes is not only fringe, but also color contamination, which causes problems when your renders have depth of field or motion blur. And there's just no way around that. Without using the special data. There's Photoshop tricks you could use, which I'm going to go over one of them, but in general, there's just nothing you can do about it. And this is where if you have to composite a lot of stuff with depth of field and stuff in Photoshop, a puzzle mat is still superior, the traditional puzzle mat system. And the reason is because each RGB is literally in its own channel. It's completely separate. It's not it's a pure RGB value, so you can't have color contamination because they're pure. And so that makes depth of field and motion blur situations a lot easier, rather than having a clown pass where you have a whole bunch of different colors and these colors bleed into each other because they share RGBs. And so, cool, we've got our render. Let's make sure that our Cryptomatte AOVs are done, and right now it's denoising for a second. And so we've got our layers, and so we've got these Cryptomattes. And so cool, and we've got our beauty. So we're gonna go load this up into Photoshop, and I'll be explaining a plugin you guys need that will make this process a lot easier. So let's pause for a second and head on over to Photoshop. Yeah, so we've got our blank Photoshop open, and most importantly, before we get to this stage, you actually need to go to this webpage, www.exr-io.com. And so it's a free plugin, so you can just, as soon as you get to the page, you can just click download. And what it does is it's basically a pretty powerful plugin for Photoshop that was designed for OpenEXR files in mind that come out of render engines. And so it just makes loading them up and using some of the EXR features inside of Photoshop way easier. Photoshop comes with an EXR reader, but it's trash. It's terrible. It doesn't let you use some of the features that EXRs come with. And so EXRs are designed to carry special data for different utility tasks, and it's a really powerful file format, an image format. And so okay, so step one, we're going to just load in our beauty. And so as soon as you start to load in, I dragged and dropped it in, and you'll get this window called, this is the EXR IO options. And so it gives you some options on how to load in stuff. For our situation, what we want is actually the split alpha. And so what this does is the renders that come out are already pre-multiplied, and what that means is that they already have the transparency cut out. We don't want that. We want the alpha to be separate, so it's not cutting our pixels out as soon as we load it in. So that's why we want this checked on. And so if we open it, you'll notice we have an A layer. This is our alpha already split, which is fine. We don't need that. And we have our beauty. And so we've got our beauty render here. And just for our purposes, we're going to load up the LUT file that we need, just because it makes things easier. And we're going to just load that up. The name of our LUT that we used in the Redshift render view. So let's look that up. And actually these LUTs are going to be included in the new post effects builds once they start coming out. And so you won't have to look for them yourself on the internet. They're going to be just a part of Redshift pretty soon. So that's just something to keep in mind. Where's it at? Here we go. And so this is the LUT. And so, okay, cool. So we've got our beauty render, and we want to tweak something, right? Like we were doing in the nuke example. And so in order to do that, we have to bring in our Cryptomattes. And so let's actually flatten this for now. So we can, or actually let's make this 16-bit, and we're going to merge it. And for the tone mapping, we just want exposure and gamma set to 0, 1. That's linear, and that's fine. So this is now a 16-bit image, and we're going to load up our Cryptomattes. So let's load up this Cryptomatte. Again, make sure split alpha is selected. And so it's going to come in black, and there's going to be all these layers. All these layers are the special data channels that we can't do anything with because we don't have a plugin for Photoshop. And so, for example, this is so it can detect edges of objects, and there's just a bunch of other data channels. We can't use any of this stuff. So the only one we want is this one, this blue one. So it's kind of like a clown pass where everything is separated. And so now what we want to do is we're gonna do that for every one of our EXRs, our Cryptomatte files. Oops. Let's cancel that actually. So let's load up another one. We'll hold Alt, click on that, flatten. We'll load in another one. Hold the Alt key, click on the eye on the blue, so it deselects everything else. Flatten it, and we'll load in one more. Hold the Alt key, and again flatten everything. Now, one of the problems is that the colors are pretty similar. So when you switch this to 16-bit mode, you could use the tone mapping tools to kind of get contrast in there. One of them that works pretty well is just equalize the histogram, because it's going to equalize all the values in the scene and thus give each color a pretty distinct value. So we're going to just do that mode, 16-bit, equalize histogram. Adjust 16-bit, equalize the histogram, 16-bit, and again we'll equalize the histogram. Okay, cool. So now let's just copy and paste these. Back into our beauty. And so now we've got a couple separate Cryptomats. And so now that we've got these, let's move our beauty up. We could use these individually as like mats or clown passes basically. And so, you know, just like any other thing, you could use the magic wand will kind of work, but for it would work better, like I said, if you had no depth of field or no motion blur. Right now this scene does have depth of field, as you can see. The sharpness changes, and so this is a little more difficult. And so the only way really that I could think of to make this easier, besides manually painting with a fuzzy brush, would be to use the color range tool. And so under select, color range, several ways you could do this. You can even try to do it automatically, and you know, like this, but I prefer to just use the sample tool. So let's say we wanted to adjust the body, the silver paint of the car. We could click that, and if you look here, now the car is selected, and you can control the fuzziness, which will help us get these gradients from the depth of field. So you can increase it or decrease it. 40 actually looked pretty good, so let's try that. And so now we've got this selection. So if we turn back on our beauty, we can make an adjustment layer. Let's I don't know, we could try curves, I guess. Let's try curves. And so right now we actually have a mask automatically set to our adjustment layer. So if I adjust it, as you can see, the results happen in real time. So you could adjust the value, or you can adjust the hue. And get some pretty instant results. And obviously, since this is curves, you can tweak the value with S curves and whatnot, right? And so cool. That let me kind of use a Clown Pass version of our Cryptomats. And so it's not perfect, but at least you're able to use the Cryptomatte system this way. And like I said, it's not perfect because certain things like this, the color difference is nearly the same as the background, so it's not always going to be just right, unfortunately, until someone comes around and actually makes a plugin. Or I'm asking in the wish list forum for Redshift to, instead of not only add value variations, but if we could add hue variations to this preview that's generated, so that way at least we get a difference not only in the blue hue, but also the value and the color change, a hue shift. So it's not just all blues. We might get, other hues in there. That'll make it a little easier to separate, but even then, you'll still have problems with depth of field, stuff like that. And really, the only tool that's made to handle this is the color range, or if you're physically manually selecting stuff. So if I do something like this, that's basically as good as it's going to get with that selection, unfortunately. So you might not be able to tell what's going on here yet, but you see, now it's selected the that part of the body. And so it's, again, this is just kind of a workaround. Since a lot of people were asking me, I don't have Nuke, I don't have Fusion or After Effects, I only have Photoshop, and I only work with stills. Well, there you go. This is your kind of like your answer. And so yeah, this just using this, you could make a good amount of adjustments to things. So again, let's adjust the tires, for example. So let's select and color range, then hold shift, which lets you add to your color range. We'll select these two tires. Let's expand it to 40. 40 is a pretty good, I think, a good starting number. And you can actually change the preview so you can see how it's getting selected. So you can see on a black mat, this is what's selected. And if we activate everything again, you can see our selection. Let's do another curves. Let's make our wheels a little darker. Cool. You could screen the layer, you could different options, Yeah, so you guys hopefully get the idea. We went from this to this with a couple adjustments using the Cryptomatte data that we've got. So for example, let's say we wanted to make the back wall darker. Again, we could just select that layer, go to select, color range, let's pick that black wall, and let's make a new curves. You could use whatever, right? Levels, all that stuff. I just prefer curves because curves give you a lot more control. They have tons of options. If you know how to use curves, I highly recommend everyone learns how to use curves. So as you can see, you can do all that stuff. We can darken it, we can lighten it. Change the hue. You can do whatever you want. So hopefully you guys now understand how you could use Cryptomatte while still being in Photoshop and not having access to an actual plugin for Cryptomatte. Again, it's not perfect, but as you can see, the results are still pretty good. You know, we're getting decent results. Obviously, the depth of field looks like it's broken here because it's too sharp. Our selection was too sharp. So let's actually throw that out and let's try again. Oh well, I guess the selection was about right, but let's make it a little softer. Let's select color range. Let's see if we can get a black matte or a white matte. And that's, as you can see, if you increase or decrease the fuzziness, you'll see that we get a little gradient going on. But now we're bringing in the wheel. So maybe decrease that, or we could just leave it at 40 and then use our select and modify it and feather it, maybe a couple pixels. Let's try feathering it 4 pixels. And let's just see what happens. Yeah, so you can see now our line, our edge is a little softer. Than it was before. But we are, oh no, this is already there. Cool. So yeah, hopefully you guys kind of see what's going on here and understand how that works and how we could use these Cryptomattes as clown passes to then adjust our beauty render with little tweaks of color changes and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully that answers those questions for people that were wondering how you could use this new system, the Cryptomatte system, with Photoshop, even though we currently don't have a Cryptomatte plugin for Photoshop. You could do it this way. Just make sure you download that plugin EXRIO, which lets you separate the alpha data from the Cryptomatte, and you'll get these clown pass looking files. All right, guys. Well, hopefully that helps some of you guys with those questions out, and I'll probably be going over atmospheres later in the next free YouTube tutorial, just because a lot of people kind of get confused with that. And so just to explain what the sliders and stuff do. But thanks again for supporting my Patreon, guys. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Bye.